firstly, thank you for coming back from lunch. You really didn't need to have to. You really didn't need to, but I do appreciate it. This is a tough time slot. Thanks, Jack. As Jack said, I'm Emma from the Conservation Ecology Centre, here to talk to you today about some density estimates we did of invasive predators in 3 Otway landscapes. First, I'd like to pay my respects to the Gadabanu and the Wadawurrung, on whose land this work took place. So, I guess, just to summarise briefly, a lot of this has already been conveyed to you, which is great. I've come in at a good time, so you heard Mark's talk, Bron's talk. So they've done a lot of the groundwork in this, so I won't go into too much depth. But basically, as Bron alluded to, understanding density can be crucial for protecting native mammals in a region. So she was talking about estimating density of potaroos. Here we're talking about estimating density of invasive predators. So it's the other side of the puzzle. Once we do that, we can really start to understand how best to manage them. And it does all come back to that kind of puzzle analogy. I'll steal that a few times. This is an important piece. So this project really goes off some monitoring protocols that we used in this project, on previous projects, and uses the methods. I've totally stolen it. Not stolen it. They were very robust. So Matt Rees did some density estimates on feral cats in the wet forest using methods much like ours, and Mark Laplat has done it with foxes using scats. So what do we do? I won't go into too much detail in regards to methods. If you want to be bored about that, no, it's fascinating. You can track me down later. But basically, our aims were to estimate density of foxes in 2 heathy woodland landscapes. In this instance, Carlisle Heath. You've probably not heard a lot about Carlisle Heath today, so I'll see if I can fill you in, because those guys did a terrible job. And Anglesey Heath, which you also heard a little bit about. So to do that with foxes, we don't go and microchip our predators. It would be great if we could, but we probably wouldn't get them back as readily as we do the potaroos. So to estimate density, you basically need to be able to ID an individual. So for foxes, the best way to do that is to collect scats. And that's a method that works really well. You follow a transect, you then you collect your scats, send them away for genetic analysis, and then you can perform spatially explicit recapture models, or CCA, which is much easier to say, to spit out your density estimate. When it comes to cats, we aim to estimate density of feral cats in those same 2 heathy woodlands, so Carlisle, Anglesey, and we also incorporated a dry forest landscape in Birnbaum, just behind Lawn. And for cats, the tried and true is to use camera traps, some stinky tuna oil that you inevitably get covered in and smell like for weeks, and some feathers just to attract them in on a lure. And then we can use their distinct coat patterns to identify individuals and use spatial marker resite models, or SEMA. So that's the methods. And like I said, this is part of the puzzle. So we've got the wet forest estimates, and now we're really building a bigger picture of the Otways in some different landscapes. So let's talk foxes. What did I expect? I felt like I knew it all because I'd done this work in the wet forest. I'd helped collect those scats. So I made a lot of assumptions. I was like, what are we going to see? I mean, these are 2, on EVC paper, identical landscapes. I think they're not. So I made a lot of assumptions, and they're very crude, but this is kind of how my brain was working, and we sort of all talked it through as we were out there. That's the transects too, circular transects that are about 16 to 18 Ks. So what did we expect? So when we think about these landscapes, they have different history of pest management. The Anglesey Heath's been exposed to fox baiting, continuous fox baiting under the Otway Arc since, I've said this so many times and I can't remember, 2015-ish. Carlisle Heath's not had any baiting, or continuous baiting, I should say. So that might be an advantage to more foxes in the Carlisle Heath. We might expect less in the Anglesey Heath. In terms of disturbance, this one was a little bit harder to pull apart because both have disturbance, obviously, but I think we can pick a winner just from walking around in both of these habitats. Anglesey Heath's definitely been ravaged by Phytophthora. It's had a more extensive and fire history. There's definitely been a lot more planned burns in the area, and it's a far more open landscape, as well as just illegal tracks. And you can you feel it when you're out there. It's like feels like walking on the moon sometimes compared to the Carlisle Heath. So that's one point to Anglesey. And then surroundings. This one was tricky. So we know foxes like those kind of urban landscapes, so that's Anglesey, but we also know that, especially sort of looking at our collar animals and some modelling that Bron's done, they do like those agricultural landscapes as well, which is kind of what Carlisle looks like. So gave it a point to both. And then time of year and season. So we did this work in summer. Ideally, you do it in autumn when the young have dispersed. So we were fully expecting that there would be young in this system. So in that regard, then that goes to both. Because even though they were different years, that's still the same season. So what did we see? All right. So on the face of it, we collected roughly the same number of scats over the same survey period. And we also got a pretty similar result in terms of individuals that were identified. That's not number, that's just percentage of those scats that were able to obtain a genotype. So if you just went off that metric alone, the number of scats that you see in an area, you sort of go, oh look, there's the same amount of foxes here, like these are really similar landscapes. And tick your box and you're done. But when we look at the next one, if you can see that, green's a terrible choice. Unique individuals. We actually had double the amount in the Carlisle Heath compared to the Anglesey Heath, which was surprising because we actually went in thinking, having worked in this area a lot, that there wasn't going to be a lot of foxes. So we had some questions around that. And then this one, just for your interest, if you're wondering what about all those other scats we collected that weren't foxes or could be foxes, but they may also be cats. It turns out in the Carlisle Heath we may have collected some cat scats, and then there was domestic dog, cat, and mystery bag, which could have been anything in Anglesey. Oops. So let's look at cats before I give you the density estimate. Similar things. So we had the three landscapes. So just for continuity, I'll run through the same kind of thought process, although I think this was a lot harder. I had far fewer expectations, actually. So if we look at pest management, similar. Anglesey, as we know, it's had the fox baiting. None of them have had cat or extensive cat management. Dry Forest has also had the continuous fox baiting under the Otway Arc. Carlisle Heath none. So we might expect that that is more advantageous to cats when there's fewer foxes in the system. Disturbance, we know Anglesey wins. Dry Forest is just that more open landscape. There's a lot more deer walking through there. There's some more illegal trails. It just was a little bit more ravaged than that kind of dense Carlisle. So they want a point there. And surroundings, really difficult. Think it could have gone anyway. Do know that some of those sort of agricultural areas around Carlisle have kind of some pits that cats kind of hang out with where carcasses have been thrown, and the Anglesey Heath has more of that kind of urban area where cats might be fed and they might integrate. So got a point there. But so I don't know how I did. It's really rough. This is obviously excluding a whole bunch of metrics that you could actually measure and look at that would be more useful. But we, just off the surface of it to get you thinking about how on paper things are, or not on paper, once you start thinking about it, they are different. Time of year, season, a little bit more vague. There were definitely likely to be kittens in that kind of summer period in Carlisle, Anglesey, and we did see that. But also the modelling, you discount that. So I just gave like a little mark that there might have been small cats in the system or some from the spring kind of litters. And then on the raw numbers, pretty similar. So similar number of cameras, similar number of survey days. However, we actually encountered a lot fewer cats just based on detections in the Carlisle Heath. And then Dry Forest and Anglesey came out really similar. I suppose the other metric that I didn't put on there, or the other one that came out, was the max distance of recaptures. And that was actually double for Anglesey. I don't know why I dropped that off, which suggested that the cats are travelling further in that landscape than they are in the other two, which I think sort of makes sense. All right, so what did we end up with once we put it through the model and spat it out? It looks something like this. So you've got your cat densities, estimated densities, I should say, in the blue and foxes in the red. There's obviously some fairly large confidence intervals there. So I'll just make the point, and I'll make it again. This is very preliminary, and we'll do some more work about teasing this out and getting some more robust results. But yes, so you could sort of say they're overlapping. So what does this really mean? If we were to, just out of interest, put the estimates for the wet forest, again, rough, it would look something like this, where we estimated cats in the wet forest well over 1 per kilometre squared, and foxes were at 0.25-ish. That's, of course, without confidence intervals, but just to give you an idea of what that kind of looks like in comparison. So we're definitely getting much lower densities of cats in these landscapes. And foxes, I think there's a little bit more to say. So some notes to take from this. Fox estimates definitely likely be inflated as a result of having pups in the system. Pups, kittens, what are they actually? Can't remember. Kittens, kits. And we confirmed this actually because we were trapping in Carlisle Heath for collaring work at the time, and we did actually catch some juveniles. One way you would avoid this is you either do these same surveys in autumn, or you could look at the familial DNA, which we weren't able to do, but you could go back and do that, and that might tell us more of a story. But I would definitely say this is the upper estimates of their density, and certainly was surprising, at least for Carlisle, where we kind of knew a bit more. Another sort of thing that adds something to that is that we actually detected fewer foxes than cats on cameras in the Carlisle. So that suggests, and slightly more in Anglesey, so it does suggest they're using these landscapes differently. So we use the track networks to sample foxes, which is great in Carlisle because they're obviously sticking to those and they're not walking through the forest. But Anglesey seems to tell a different story where it's far more open. They may not be more reliant. So these are all kind of biases in our data, I think. The Carlisle cat, this was nice. The Carlisle cat estimate was largely supported by our on-ground experience. We knew exactly where they were going to turn up. And this is exactly as sort of Mark was describing, how they make these decisions with their landscape. We were expecting them to turn up on cameras in those wet gullies, 100%. Only places they turned up. We were expecting them to be at really low densities, 100%. It really matched the trapping that we were doing. So I'm pretty happy with that. And it also helped that we had collared animals because it made IDing them really easy and they have names. We also, you can see some, Anglesey Heath had really large confidence intervals on the cat density estimate, and I think a lot of that's attributed to we had a lot of false triggers. Cameras kind of in open heathland in the summer, they just tend to heat up the vegetation. If you have just one piece of grass in front of you, thing that you're done, your camera goes for a day and there's nothing to look at. So they definitely took some cameras out of our system in the grid. So we had I'd say that's roughly largely what's contributed to that kind of not so robust estimate. And as I said, these numbers are preliminary. We'll really do more to bring it down and look at some of those things that are a little bit more interesting. So how are these two interacting? What are some other variables in these landscapes? Add it into that kind of piece of into that bigger puzzle. Look at the wet forest estimates more closely and start to pull this apart and make it a more interesting story. And I'll finish on Gaston because I knew Mark was going to talk about him, even if he said he wouldn't, because it just brings that home about why we do this work. So he was popping up on all our cameras and we know he was loving life out there. And why it's important that you understand what's happening with the predators as well as the prey so that you can make those correct management decisions. Thank you.